Hi, this is Brett Ingram, entrepreneur and award-winning product creator, and today I want to share with you 9 questions that help entrepreneurs find their vision and purpose. Some entrepreneurs start off immediately with a grand vision, right? That's the thing that actually inspires them. So whether or not it's, somebody who's young or old or male or female, it doesn't really matter. The fact is, sometimes somebody will find a vision, they'll find something that gives them the purpose, and that's what actually inspires them to become an entrepreneur. It wasn't that they set out to run a business or, to be their own boss or any of those other kinds of things, but they just sort of got grabbed by this idea that they could change the world or make people's lives better or whatever it is. And that was the motivating force, right? It wasn't money. It wasn't the ability to go out there and be their own boss or fire their employer or any of those other kinds of things. And by the way, one is not better than the other. While it would be nice and it's certainly romantic, the idea that we have this grand vision and that's the thing that gets us all into entrepreneurship, the fact is it's just not true. A lot of people actually start a different way, but some people start off with that grand vision. That's what inspires them to become an entrepreneur in the first place. But for others, it actually starts the opposite way. So you get this entrepreneurial bug. You've got an idea that you want to be an entrepreneur. You do want to be your own boss. You want to be able to make money. You want to be able to call your own shots. You don't really like having other people tell you what to do. There can be 100 different reasons. You want to control your own destiny. It's a sense of control. You hear the call and you want to be your own boss, or maybe you do want to change the world, but you're just not sure how yet. You do have this grand vision. You think that there's a bigger purpose. You think that there's something more out there for you than just punching a clock and going about it. And that's totally fine. Look, I know when I was young, I felt entrepreneurial, very, very young. And it was something that was always really close to my heart, and I don't know why. I grew up in a very sort of average circumstance. My family certainly wasn't very well off, but we weren't poor either. So I had a fairly normal, lower, middle class essentially upbringing. And, we were comfortable enough. We had all the necessities that we needed, and we had a family and everything. So I didn't have any real strong reason or real strong understanding of where it comes, like inherently from the very beginning. But I just knew that I had this sort of desire in me, and I always wanted to do that. So, I had paper routes when I was young. I started with lemonade stands and iced tea stands and making chestnut necklaces. My vision wasn't to build chestnut necklaces and sell them around the world. That was not how I was going to change the world. I didn't really think that was a big growth industry. It just was the simple fact that, for me, I loved the idea of having a business and being able to do something and create something and make money from it. And I just loved that whole idea. And so, that was sort of where it all started for me, and I didn't have a grand vision. So that's very common also. We know we want to do it, but we don't know how. And, rest assured and take comfort in the fact that if that's where you are, some of the most successful entrepreneurs in history started that way. So there isn't one way to do it. There isn't like one way or this is better or that's better. The romantic fantasy of having this wonderful idea and then bringing it into reality is great, but it's not always the way that it works. Now, the one challenge is if we are in that sort of second bucket where we know that we really want to do something, we want to be an entrepreneur, we want to be a business owner, and we want to control our own destiny, that's great. But to make it happen, we do still need an idea, right? We still need to find something that we're going to do that's going to make sense. So in order to be able to write our own success story, we do ultimately need to find our vision or purpose, right? Because if we don't do that, then it's going to be difficult. We're going to be jumping around from one thing to another. We're not really passionate about any of it. And the one thing that's, for certain, that's universal about entrepreneurship is that it's not easy. It can be glamorous and it's glamorized a lot. But the general idea or the actual reality is in the trenches on a day-to-day basis, it can be a slog. It's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of obstacles, it's a lot of problem solving, and it's a lot of sacrifice. And so if we aren't clear on what we want to do and we're just sort of only focused on the money or whatever thing where we thought we could make it go, that isn't going to work. And I'll give you an example of that too. One of my first real entrepreneurial ventures, I actually started a business out of college where I was building custom configured PCs, computers, and I was, shipping them around the country and everything. And I loved technology and I loved entrepreneurship, so it seemed to make a lot of sense. The fact is, though, I didn't do a lot of market research. I didn't understand a lot about it. I was kind of young, I was kind of naive, and despite the fact that I had a business degree, and a strong work ethic and all these other things, I didn't really have a lot of the tools I needed to be successful. And I also didn't really know that that was what I wanted to do. I just knew that, it sounded good. And what made me start that business is I was helping my buddy build a computer, and he knew I was really into it. So he said, hey, can you help me? And we went to this little computer fair, and I saw all these components for cheaper than I could buy them, buy them. There was no online, but that I could buy them in a computer in the store. And so I realized, wow, I could build a computer for hundreds of dollars less than I could go buy it. And so that's where I got the idea from. Not the most glamorous, but I thought, hey, it marries a couple of the things that I really like, so I'll go ahead and I'll do this. And that's what I did. And when times were good and in the beginning, I was motivated and excited. But when we hit times of struggle, even though I had a really strong work ethic and a real desire to succeed, I found it difficult because I wasn't as passionate about that particular business. I just was passionate about being an entrepreneur. So I could see my mind wandering to what other things could I do. And that was not a great sign. When I'm not committed to the mission that I'm set out to do, I know that I'm not really, in the greatest position to succeed. And so, that can happen as well. And so it's important to try to get as much clarity as we can up front, right? We want to go with the carpenter's rule. Measure twice, cut once. Even though we're anxious to get going and get our entrepreneurial journey started, if we aren't clear on what we want to do, it's more important to spend the time to find it and be sure about it before we jump in and make a mistake that then we're going to regret later. So there are some empowering questions, right, that we can ask ourselves that will help us reach real clarity and focus so we can achieve the success that we dream of. And so I want to share a few of those questions with you because I think that if we are in a situation where we want to be an entrepreneur, but we need that vision, we need that mission, we need to know what our big purpose is, these can help us get to the truth of that, if it isn't right on the surface for us. So the first question is, what can I be the best at in the world, right? So the idea of this question is real simple. If we know that we have a skill, we have a strength in something, that's something that naturally makes a lot of sense to go into. Because at the end of the day, entrepreneurship and business ownership is competition. We're going to be competing. We're going to be competing with all of our competitors. There are going to be people that love what they do, that get up in the morning excited to go to work. They can't wait to get moving. Their mind doesn't stop moving. They're going to work as hard as they can. You see this in every walk of life, but particularly in the sporting arena, there's a very easy analogy. There are those guys that are the first ones in the facility in the morning, last ones to leave at night. And if they also have natural talent, that's going to be impossible to compete with because they're willing to do whatever it takes. They will sacrifice their personal life. They will sacrifice anything and everything to get what they want. So if they're willing to do that and they have natural ability, they're going to win. And so we want to know what we can be really good at because that's going to help us get some clarity on where our strengths lie. So at least we're going to focus on something where we have an opportunity or a chance to be really, really good at it, right? So these are the way that you can determine this too, if you can't think of it yourself, is think about what people have complimented you for in your life. Think about anything that you've won awards for, or been recognized for, or people always tell you, or whatever. Those are the kinds of things that are going to sort of get to the truth of what you could be the best at. And, you don't always literally have to be the best, but it just has to be something that you could be excellent. You need to be able to be top few percent at, right, in the world in order to be effective as an entrepreneur in that. And so that's sort of the idea of that. And all of these questions we want to really think about. These aren't things you write down on the back of a napkin and whip through in 5 minutes. These are questions that we ponder until we come up with the right answer that just feels right in our gut. So some of these might be very easy and they might pop right into your mind, and others you might need to really think about, and that's okay too. The next question is, what excites and energizes me that I could do all day, every day? This gets back to that first one, right? If you're the first one in the gym, you're the first one in the facility, you're the last one to leave, you are going to be really hard to compete with. Because the fact is, you love it so much that you get up in the morning excited to go to work or excited to do what you're doing. When I was in staffing for a few years, I worked with a woman who owned one of the companies that I worked for. And she was so passionate. And actually, I ran into this circumstance twice. I was actually in 2 different businesses where they were both female run, and the CEOs of both of them were excellent. They loved what they did. They were staffers at heart. They weren't even really business owners. They were more staffers than they were business owners. But, they wanted to build an enterprise and do this. And the fact is, they were so passionate about it that it rubbed off on everybody else around them. But at the same time, it was a big warning beacon for anybody who was sort of doing it for a paycheck. I liked it. I didn't love it. They loved it. And I could tell intuitively, as smart as I am, or as talented as I am, or as personable as I am, and all these other things that people would tell me all the time, I knew that at the end of the day, I could never compete with them. I could never outcompete them and be better than them, because their passion would overwhelm whatever my natural ability was. They were good at it anyway. But, so it isn't like, so whether or not I would be better or not, it didn't really matter. But the fact is, they also had a level of passion I couldn't replicate in that particular industry. And so I knew that it was right for them and it wasn't right for me. And so if it's something that you would do all day, every day, and love it, even at the end of the day, as exhausted as you are, and you're not looking at the clock, that's another huge clue to something that makes a lot of sense to go into, because it's going to give you that drive you need. It's going to give you that wellspring of resources that you need and reserves for when times are tough. And it's going to allow you to keep focusing on what you love to do, and that's really important. The next question is, if I knew I would succeed, what would I do? One of the things that holds us back as entrepreneurs and human beings in general is the fact that we fear failure. A lot of us don't want to try things that we don't think we're going to be able to be good at. And so if we eliminate that as an obstacle, so we eliminate the fear, we eliminate the worry about failure and what if it doesn't work, and we just focus on, if we knew we could do this, you could pick any goal in the world and you knew you would be successful at it, what would you choose to do? Because again, that is going to help you understand what you really enjoy, what you're really passionate about, what you're naturally inclined toward. I remember they used to do this personality tests, right? And you would come back with like introvert, extrovert, these other kinds of things. And I remember thinking every time I went through these tests, well, it depends, right? Every time I get an answer, well, would you rather be at a party or would you rather sit in your room reading a book? Well, it depends. I mean, there are days where I'd love to socialize and be, out at a party. And there are other days where I, would rather be in my house reading a book. So there was never a good or bad answer to those. It was always sort of conditional. And so I always had a problem with those tests because I liked the idea of it, but it didn't really make sense. And then a few years later, I ran into this other kind of test, and I forget what it's called. But basically what it was there to determine was not whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, but what your natural inclinations are, right? So while we can be great in social situations and we can be great in our private personal life, we can value like together time and alone time. There's generally a proclivity we have, or a particular sort of natural way that we innately gravitate toward. And those are the kinds of things that we want to determine when we're thinking about an entrepreneurship venture. Not so much like what could we do or what would we be willing to do, but if we had no constraints, what would we gravitate toward, right? Those are the things that are really going to help us get there. The next question is, what do I want most? What do I want most? I mean, in your life, what do we want most? Because that is going to be the thing, money, security. Yes, but beyond that, when we dig deeper, what is it that we really want that is going to, help us reach that level of fulfillment and meaning in our life? Because at the end of the day, money doesn't give us meaning, right? Security doesn't give us meaning. It makes us comfortable, but it doesn't give us meaning. It doesn't give us fulfillment. You can have all the money in the world and not feel fulfilled. And so, we see that all the time. There are people that abuse drugs and get into all kinds of problems, and you think from the outside, they have every advantage, they have everything they could ever want in their entire life. It doesn't make any logical sense. But they have no purpose, they have no meaning, so there's no fulfillment there. So all the money in the world isn't going to help them. So what do I want most? The next question is, what do I want my life to be about, right? And this is a really good one. If I think about it and I think about what I want my life to be about, now it starts to become a little bit more clear. It starts to become more aligned with purpose and more aligned with, what my vision's going to be. Because what do I want my life to be about? I mean, do I want it to be about this, or do I want it to be about that? What do I want people to think about when they think about me? What do I want to think about when I reflect about things, right? So what do I want my life to be about? That's going to help us get another level of clarity as well. What are my goals? What are the things that I want to achieve? Again, the easy ones, the ones that always jump to our minds are, well, I want a nice house, or I want a lot of money, or I want this. But when we dig deeper than that, when we don't accept that from ourselves as an answer, and we insist on going deeper and understanding what it is about that we really want. What are my goals? What are the things that I want to accomplish? What are the things that I, would want to be remembered for, or want to feel that I've achieved? What are the things that are going to make me feel successful and feel as though I've accomplished something? Those are the kinds of goals that we want to be talking about. Next question is, if money were not an issue, what would I do with my life? There we go. We take the money out of the equation entirely, and we say, what do we just want our life to be about? What do we want to do? Do we want to volunteer our time over here? Do we want to, make sure that water is available for everybody on the planet? Do we want to, build the best sweaters that anybody's ever worn? Do we want to create the greatest software platform? Whatever it is, whatever we would want to do with our life, if we had no financial constraint whatsoever, we had all the money we could ever need for our own purposes, and we had all the money we could ever need for our venture, what would we do with our lives? That's a really powerful question, because it really starts to get down to what those things are that will give us individual and personal meaning, fulfillment, value, and all of those kinds of things, and purpose. And so that's super important as well. The next question is, what would success look like? So, okay, I want to be an entrepreneur and I want to be successful, but in all honesty, when I really break that down, what does it even look like? How can I define that? If I force myself to define it, then I get into a situation where I start to understand what that really looks like for me. What does success look like? I mean, what do I need to do? What changes do I need to make in the world? What accomplishments, what fulfillment do I need to achieve? What difference do I need to make to other people? What, improvements in their lives do I need to make for that to feel like success? And then what do I want my legacy to be, or what do I want to be remembered for? And this is the old, what are you going to write on your tombstone question, right? But it's really important. While on some level it might seem morbid, or we're looking back on our lives that haven't occurred yet or whatever, it's really important to think about that in advance, because the only opportunity we have to make any change or take any action is today. We can't affect the past. We can't affect the future right now. We can only impact the present. But if we know what we'd want to be able to look back and say about ourselves, what we'd want others to say about us, and what we'd want our legacy to be, then we know what we need to do today to get there. We can work it backward and figure out, this is the legacy. I want to be remembered for making, the greatest podcast that changed more entrepreneurs and would-be entrepreneurs' lives than anybody else in history. Great. So today I'm going to start a podcast, and I'm going to do that and start to create content that hopefully is going to help people. And by doing that, that's going to help reach that goal in the end. And maybe I won't be the best or, the biggest impact, but it doesn't matter as long as I have the impact that makes me feel like I contributed something, that I fulfilled my purpose in life, and that, I helped other people along the way. When we take time to think through those questions and we answer them thoroughly and stew on them, think about them, let them germinate for a while. We don't need to come up with answers immediately, but think about them. Revisit the list of questions every day, until it starts to become clear. We get a clear understanding of who we are and what we can become. We can determine what path will give us the greatest sense of fulfillment, accomplishment, and success, right? And that's ultimately what we want to do. And it's important to know too that this is dynamic and can change. So we aren't putting our, footprints in stone and cement and saying, well, this is what we're going to do the rest of our lives. I've changed my business purpose 5 times in the last 15 years. That's totally fine. We can revisit these questions every 6 months, every year, every 5 years, whatever, and decide, do we still want to do what we're doing, or do we want to shift gears, sell the business we're working on, or divest it, or whatever, move on to something else. Whatever it is that's going to give us that sort of fulfillment, it can be dynamic and it can change. So we do want to do a pulse check every so often. The takeaway here is that some entrepreneurs start their journey with an end in mind, and they know exactly what they want to do. Others know they want the life of an entrepreneur with the risks and rewards that it comes with, but aren't sure exactly what their story should be. By asking ourselves the right questions and really thinking about the answers, we can gain a new level of understanding of ourselves and our purpose, create the right vision, and reach the level of clarity and focus we need to achieve our dreams, and maybe, just maybe, even change the world.